All right, so for this little project, I had this idea weeks ago to come up with a code that does the following. And I wanted to say you were in a given class, whether you were in middle school, high school, or college. And I wanted this code to calculate the final grade that you got in the class. So it takes in the name of the subject or the name of the class that you're in, the number of categories that comprise of your grade. So for example, if you are being graded on homework, tests, quizzes, and so on in the syllabus, as well as the percent in which it makes up for your final grade, to return a number or a letter in this case. And then for the pseudocode, the only requirement that I gave myself to do was to do this without having to use a struct or a class. In future videos, I'm gonna elaborate, or I guess demystify the use of a struct and a class, and we'll use other examples that involve the use of structs and class, so don't worry about that. And also for any functions that could be used for this project, that is totally up to you, and you can use this. So this is how I essentially do it. So I started out by including or writing out my standard libraries, so that a lot of the things that we're going to be using, like our C-ins and our C-outs and whatnot, and our strings, or the way we use our strings, are going to be accessible, and the compiler won't really give us any problems. So that's why you could see these little library headers and such. So in this comment, or in this section, this is where I wanted to initialize my variables. So this is what I did. So I wanted to dedicate two string data types for subjects. So for each subject that was within the syllabus in the class, as well as So I wanted the subject to be the name of the course, so if it was like a math or English course, and then I wanted to dedicate a separate variable for the category names, and then the letter grade that was received based on the actual grade that you got from your final grade calculation. So when the code runs and everything, say for instance you got an 87, this variable is there to print out a letter grade based on the number that it's given within the grading scale. So if it's an 87, in most grading scales, that'd be around a B+. So this would be used to print out an actual letter that corresponds with that number. And then for this category number, I wanted to display, or at least use, the number of categories that are in the course. So if there are 3 categories that dedicate towards homework, quizzes, and projects, this is what this variable is for, and the percent being how much the grade or that category is worth in terms of calculating the final grade, and the initial grade that the person got in this one. All right, so we have a few things going on here. This section is dedicated to the functions needed to do 2 things. I wanted one function that does the actual mathematical calculation of the final grade that you got in the class, the grade that you got in a specific category, and then a separate function that prints the result that you got from this function. And then I use these 2 integers for what's to come next in the main function. And for final grade, I wanted to use this variable to store what I got in this function here, and then a temporary variable named pot that we will be using later to not only print out the final grade in the class, but to use that to print out a letter associated with the final grade. And then for this function here, for grade calculation, this is what you would call the function definition. The functions here above, these 2 functions are referred to as the function calls, the function declarations, where we're basically saying that, okay, the name of this function here, we are hereby acknowledging its existence within the code. It's going to do something, And then over here, where we define what the function actually does, the definition is where the magic actually happens. Here, we're just saying that it exists and it's going to do something. This is entailing what it actually does. So the first function, grade calc, we tell the user to type in the grade they got for each category, and we put it inside the variable, and then we use that variable to calculate the final grade that they got in the class. And then afterwards, in the print grade calc, whatever we have calculated in our previous function, it prints out the return value of that function, which in this case, I wanted it to be a float. And in future videos, I will break down or simplify these concepts so that it's not as alien for those who are rather new and really want to get into C++, and it will make more sense out of it. All right, looks like a lot. It might not be for some people. That's okay. I'll explain what my thought process was. So in essentially every major coding language or coding language in general, there is a special type of function that we use that does all the things that we want to do, can communicate with the user to get it to do what we want it to do. And that's the main function. The main function is responsible for a lot. It is a space where we use to call, initialize variables and functions and certain types of mechanics that are general in any coding language to do the specific things that we outlined in our algorithms and the pseudocodes that we draft out. So depending on how your pseudocode and your algorithm is, say for instance you want a developer to create a game for you, and the developer does their best job to take whatever it is that the user wants, constructs a modular and a recyclable pseudocode, and does what they need to do, or does the majority of the processes and whatnot inside the main function. And depending on certain types of languages that do their mechanics differently, like with C++ in particular, for instance, if you recall, I mentioned about function declarations and definitions. A lot of those exist outside the main function, such that once we create them and we declare their existence and define what they actually do outside the main, we can then use the main function to call them to do specific things. And I believe this is exclusive to C++. I'm not sure what other languages do at the moment, since I haven't had that much exposure to any other languages. But I know in particular with C++, a lot of the definitions that we do with certain functions and whatnot can fall outside of the main function. And then we use the main function to call those functions to carry out the tasks that we have outlined within the definitions inside here. So carrying on, in the main function, in layman's terms, that's where a lot of the magic happens, and we directly communicate with the user to input the necessary information needed to carry out the functions we detailed. So in the beginning, in our cout statement, we tell the user, okay, what's the name of your subject? And whatever the user types in, they type it inside the subject. And then afterwards, we tell them, or we ask them how many categories make up the final grade. We put it inside this variable here. And then once that happens, a lot of the legwork that we need to do so that we don't have to repeat it, we use is what it's called is a for loop. And a for loop is there such that depending on what you set your boundaries to and the size, it can iterate a specific number of tasks that you outlined a set number of times. So I use a random generic integer that I have defined ranging from 0 to whatever number that I want. So in this case, I've previously declared and defined what my value for category number was. And for simplicity's sake, I'll say 4. So in this case, for example, we could say that in the for loop ranging from 0 to 4, iterating between 0 and 4, we will be going through these set of processes. And in these processes, we basically tell the user, okay, type in the number of categories, call the function grade calc to calculate the final grade that they got inside those categories, and then print the result. And then what really makes this modular, or makes this possible to actually get the desired result, is to use this temporary variable called pot to hold the final grade they got in the categories, and to tabulate it, or to add it a set number of times that we have outlined, so that it's not just taking in one value unless that's what you specified it. And for example, if the categories in the syllabus are 3 or 4, it individually calculates the grade that the person got in a specific category individually, adds them up together to get your final grade. And then once that's done, we have these set of statements that serves as a range of what type of letter grade that the code will print. So if your final grade based on what you've done inside the loop through a sequence is, for example, a 60, within a 60 or a 70, for example, it would fall here. Anything less than a 60 would print an F. As we can see here, we say here in the statement, if pot, or the final grade in this case, is less than a 60, you get an F. Or another example would be, okay, if pot is greater than or equal than 90, or equal than 100, it will print an A. And that is essentially how the user will determine what type of letter grade they got, not only the numerical grade, but the letter grade that they got. And then below, to make it a much more visually appealing or tangible experience, we tell the user this is your final grade and its corresponding letter. So now we can run that, but let me just open that again. Yeah, let's run that. All right, so once that's done, we can run the code. All right, so it says type in the name of the class to begin calculating your final grade. So I'm gonna say Avatar. I'm gonna say Avatar. Next, type in the number of categories. Let's say 4. Name. Earth. 100% mastery on that, of course. 25% of the grade. So now it has individually calculated the subcategory of Earth, which is the name of the category and the final grade that you got in the subcategory. And in the function definition of how it does calculate it, the generic formula that I used was the grade, the initial grade that you got in the category, times the percent of the grade. And I believe in one of the numbers it was like divided by 100 or whatever. So yeah, we're gonna just do this a few times. So let's do fire. Grade 25%. And then it just repeats. Percent, blah, blah, blah. Type the name, air, grade, percent. And yeah, grade is 100, and the letter associated with that is an A. So yeah, it works. And let's get out of here. So yeah, that's essentially it. That was the code that I did and got it to work. Future videos, when I do the next or a couple practice codes or whatever that involves this, I want to delve more into a deeper, much more rich example of calculating the GPA of a student using classes and structs. And then by then, I'll have other videos uploaded before then that delves into the basics of programming and then the concepts leading up to object-oriented programming. So it will make a lot more sense for those who are unfamiliar. So yeah, it's your boy Abdul, aka Smiley Juice Man, and I'll catch you later. Be easy.